Well, it was about time. We finally got some news on the third Enola Holmes movie. A little while ago, I was scrolling along aimlessly when I came across a gem of a video that officially announced Enola Holmes 3 was in production. Since then, more details have been released by Netflix, and so that's what I want to dive into today. Everything we know about Enola Holmes 3 and my complete baseless speculation as to what could unfold in the movie. If we predict accurately, it'll be a miracle, but it's a lot of fun to try, so let's get started. First up, I think it's important to set the stage. Way back in 2018, we got the announcement that Millie Bobby Brown would star in a brand new film set around a sister character of Sherlock Holmes. Naturally, the internet somewhat kicked back on this, sick and tired of women having the audacity to enter themselves into the public domain. By and large, though, didn't make huge news. However, despite its initial lukewarm reception, it wasn't only audiences getting themselves hysterical. The Conan Doyle estate, famous for being very, very reasonable, had a bone to pick with the upcoming film. According to them, this version of Sherlock Holmes violated copyright because, let me just check my notes. Oh, that's right, he has emotion, and it wasn't cited in Sherlock literature until the mid-1920s that was the case. Checkmate, they thought, until it was dismissed as it was completely ridiculous. I mean, seriously, could you imagine making an original story about some character in Harry Potter once he enters public domain, and the Rowling estate making a claim that, well, actually, Harry wasn't possessed until book 5. You can't use that plot. Doesn't make sense. It's not just book lore that enters the domain, it's the character specifically, and you can do whatever you want to him. Hence the Mickey horror films immediately being made. I really can't stand it when people are trying to ruin others' fun when it doesn't matter anymore. What money could they possibly make for preventing this? No one's going to buy your Sherlock Holmes book because he has emotion in the decade before it enters public domain. Sit down. With that rant out of the way, we come to the first movie, which released in 2020. Right out of the gate, I was pretty excited. I enjoyed the Robert Downey Jr. movies. I loved the BBC version, which had me wanting more after it wound down in 2017, so I was practically starved of Sherlock content. Even though I knew this would follow a new character, Sherlock's sister, it didn't bother me in the slightest. I was keen for a new take, and Millie Bobby Brown has proved herself a pretty great actress. I was keen to see what she could do. The day it released, I watched it, and then I watched it again the next day. Pretty sure I watched it at least 3 times that weekend. And ever since then, it's been on a consistent rotation amongst my favourite movies that I love to rewatch. I won't dive into the plot super in depth, we'd probably be here all day if I did, however it's probably worthwhile to have a bit of a refresher so we can have a basis of where the story's going to go. So in the first film we're introduced to Enola, the daughter of Eudora Holmes, and the considerably younger sister of Mycroft and Sherlock. Her father passed away when she was young, and her brothers moved out to start their own careers, so she was raised solely by her mother. She had an unconventional but happy childhood, becoming extremely adept at both physical and intellectual tasks. On her 16th birthday, her mother vanishes without a trace, and her brothers are called to the house to look after Enola and investigate their mother's disappearance. With the threat of having a far more restricted lifestyle dictated by societal norms, she disguises herself and runs away in hopes of finding out why her mother left and where she could be. This plan gets completely derailed by young Marquis, who's also on the run and is subsequently being hunted down. Narrowly avoiding assassination thanks to Enola, they make their way to London where they separate. Enola discovers concerning clues about her mother, fearing she's joined a radical feminist group hell-bent on terrorism, but is soon interrupted by Tewkesbury's attacker and changes plans to help him instead. She goes to his estate, discovers he's not as stupid as she thought, and finds him back in London. Their investigation short-lived as Enola's discovered and is taken back to her brother Mycroft. She's sent to a finishing school which Tewkesbury breaks her out from, and they go back to his estate to confront who's trying to kill him, as she's discovered his assassination had political motive. They save the day, Enola cracks the case before Sherlock, and she ends up hiding back in London under far better conditions than before. And to top it all off, her mum comes and sees her. The end. So pretty solid, honestly. I didn't even get to the whole fun disguises or heartwarming plot that she can be a woman who wants to work and be educated, but also have people in her life that give her meaning. The romance between her and Tewkesbury is obviously the standout, and it's got that perfect mix of mystery, comedy, and wholesomeness. Easily became one of my favourite movies of all time. Naturally, I couldn't wait for the second one. I gotta be honest with you, there was a brief period of time when the sequel was announced, and they hadn't confirmed Tewkesbury's return, despite saying Enola and Sherlock would be in it, so there was some anxiety around this movie. Especially since his story was really only in the first book, which the film was very, very loosely based on. Thankfully, he was still in it, and is now a permanent fixture in the franchise. Would have been a mistake if they didn't follow up. Anyway, the second movie. Released in 2022, the sequel follows Enola's initial unsuccessful attempt at running her own detective agency. Fortunately for her, a young girl comes along and asks her for help to find her missing sister. We learn that this girl works at a matchstick factory suffering from a typhus epidemic. Enola meets another girl, May, who takes her to the theatre where the sister, Sarah, worked. There's a letter that alludes to the girl having a secret lover, but all of this gets pushed to the side as Enola encounters a drunken Sherlock. He has a separate investigation going concerning blackmailing government officials. Whilst Enola initially tries to help, he shrugs her off, and so instead, she tries to decipher the letter that's in form of a poem. We see she's been spying on Tewkesbury and has an awkward interaction with him, clearly suffering from some sort of commitment issues. After she cracks her letter, she goes to the destination where the girl that helped her, May, is dying from somebody who's attacked her. Being found alongside May, Enola's accused of the murder, and so she runs off, and she finds sanctuary at Sherlock's before deducing who the lover is and goes to a high society ball to speak with him. Meanwhile, Sherlock investigates Enola's case and figures out they're all linked. Enola disguises herself and attempts to confront the lover William Lyons, with some Tewkesbury shenanigans happening simultaneously. Unfortunately, she gets arrested for the murder of May and is immediately sent to jail. Sherlock attempts to interfere, but the superintendent has a bad grudge against him and won't help. Therefore, Sherlock sends their family friend to save her, who goes to break Enola out alongside her mum. The superintendent, Grail, tries to stop them to no avail, and Enola makes her way back to London. She discovers that the matchsticks are poisoning the girls. Figuring Tewkesbury could help her because of his connections, she visits him, where she then figures out that Sarah's been hiding in plain sight. There's also a whole love confession between Enola and Tewkesbury, which is very adorable. They make their way back to the factory, where Enola meets up with Sherlock, and they, along with Tewkesbury, discover that William's been murdered due to his plan to divulge the corruption around the dangerous working conditions in the factory. They discover the sheet music from May's body was actually a map to the theatre, so they head off to get proof. Unfortunately, they're all ambushed, and a fight ensues where Grail dies, and we learn that the paper trail of blackmail and murder actually led to the secretary who's privy to all the corruption, aka Moriarty. She's arrested, and unfortunately for the girls, the evidence of the corruption's burned. Nevertheless, at the end, the women go on strike, Enola continues her detective agency at Edith's shop, and Moriarty escapes. Again, just another awesome movie that perfectly builds on the first one. You have those themes of connection again, this time more closely between Sherlock and Enola. You also have Enola making progress with what she's been taught about not needing connection, but also still stumbling along the way. And finally, you have her continue her mother's efforts in feminist movements in her own way. What can I say? The franchise is awesome. As you can probably tell, I was eagerly awaiting the third movie announcement. However, I was acutely aware that Millie Bobby Brown was in the thick of production of the final seasons of Stranger Things, filming for what, like a year? Yikes. So I wasn't too concerned about not getting much follow-up for a while. I honestly wasn't expecting anything until after the press tour for Stranger Things for her to be free to make it. And that wasn't even taking into account all the other actors that had to be available. I mean, Henry Cavill and Helena Bonham Carter aren't exactly going to be free at the drop of a hat. Thankfully, I was wrong though. We got the announcement last month that Enola Holmes 3 is officially in production. Quite creatively, I might add, but before we dive into the specifics of the video they released, I think we'll mention everything we know so far about the third film. The tagline for the latest installment is, "Adventure chases Detective Enola Holmes to Malta, where personal and professional dreams collide in a case more tangled and treacherous than any she's faced before." We also know the film's being directed by Philip Barantini, and the writer is Jack Thorne. The cast includes Millie Bobby Brown as Enola, Louis Partridge as Tewkesbury, Henry Cavill as Sherlock, Helena Bonham Carter as Eudora, Umesh Patel as Dr. Watson, and Sharon Duncan Brewster as Moriarty. As of right now, we don't have a release date. That's pretty much everything we know so far. The cast is largely self-explanatory. We know the first four characters are crucial to the film based on the overall story, and Moriarty was a clear setup at the end of the second film, as well as that tease at the end with Dr. John Watson. I do hope we get Edith again because I really enjoy her character, and it would be nice for Mycroft to return in some capacity. I'd love to see his reaction to Enola now, as long as he has absolutely zero control. Even better would be a scene between him and his mum, with him just getting absolutely schooled and roasted, with him powerless to do anything. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Apart from the plot tease, the most notable information we have is the new director, Philip Barantini. We've had Harry Bradbeer direct the first two films, so it's always nerve-wracking to see somebody else come in and put their vision in a film that had a very particular vibe. Fortunately, there are two things to be positive about. The writer remains the same, Jack Thorne, who's done a spectacular job so far, and quite honestly, has made some seriously good content consistently. I feel like he's kind of underrated when it comes to writers. He's genuinely great in so much he does. On top of that, he worked with this director before on the hit show Adolescence. Man, that was a good series. So unique in its filming style, and the way that everything felt so organic was just a standout in that show. That means they must have a pretty good relationship, and Jack trusts him with the franchise. It also works from a cinematic point of view. There's no denying that Enola is one of the more quirky franchises when it comes to how the story plays out. It's not cookie cutter in any case, especially when its fourth wall breaks. Having someone that naturally goes outside the boundaries in filmmaking is probably a good step up and will fit right in. The tone shouldn't end up feeling too different and conservative with a new director like that. It also has to be said, there was some sort of joint social media post done with Millie and the boy from Adolescence, and that makes sense I think, considering he's been doing press for the show, and the director's just signed on for Enola Holmes. However, it also has made me think that maybe he could have a role in the upcoming movie. It would be a big favour for him to get a leg up and not get typecast as a dark, crazy villain. Perfect opportunity in my eyes, and I'd like to see it. Anyway, enough of that. Let's dive into the video that released, announcing the third film. We have a bit where Tewkesbury meets up with Enola and apologises for being late, offering her flowers. Enola's having none of that though, and she's walking off on him while he continues to say sorry. She says that she's going to speak with his mother, which freaks him out, only for her to not be available. Shenanigans ensue, Enola's upset about the type of flowers he got her, and there's talk about it being an important day. Enola attempts to go off in a car on her own, until Tewkesbury gets mad, so she doesn't leave. She finally accepts his apology, and they make up, only for the director to come out and tell them they need to be making the movie. The best part of all of this by far is the director directly scolding the cameraman, who then says they made him do it. Interestingly, this was all filmed in just one take, like Adolescence. It's also intriguing that the script can stay pretty much exactly the same and be transported to the correct time period and still work. This makes me think that this could very well be a tease for a scene within the actual movie, otherwise it's a lot of unnecessary writing just for a bit. I mean, it's great marketing, but I still think it could be used within the film itself. To be honest, I'm torn on that, because I love the whole Enola-Tewkesbury relationship, and getting any type of content focused on them is great, but it also means that I don't want to see any scenes unfinished because I want to experience it all for the first time in the movie. Now, I'm sure there will be plenty of scenes to make up for it though. This gives me the idea that this film, whilst focused on the mystery and everything else, will also focus more heavily on their romance than the previous movies. We still get a considerable amount in the sequel, but it wasn't as much as in the first. It also shows that the filmmakers know that Enola and Tewkesbury are by this point really the big draw of the franchise. That's good in my opinion. It shows they're going to cater to that. Based on the description, they won't exactly be in paradise on a personal level, which is kind of good in a way. Enola's development on an emotional level has been very gradual, and they only just started properly courting / being in a relationship at the end of the last movie, so I'd expect there's going to be a few bumps in the road. I have a good idea on how it's going to end for this movie, but I'll touch on that a little later. For now, we need to go through the basis for the plot and see whether we can puzzle out the story for this third film. Overall, precedent would dictate that the films take some inspiration from the books, but largely write their own version of the story. The first book has the Viscount, but his and Enola's relationship is entirely different, and so is the way the story unfolds. The second is kind of similar, but it's even more of a divergence. Instead of a working class girl that goes missing, it's a lady. There's a man involved that could be her lover, but it wasn't genuinely romantic, from my memory at least. The third book, which I haven't read, seems to involve Enola hunting down Dr. John Watson, who's gone missing. She uses the flowers that were left for Watson as a clue to find him and his kidnapper. Apparently, he gets falsely admitted to a mental asylum, and the brother reunites to rescue him. Honestly, a lot of this plot could really work. My idea based on this would be the target of Sherlock's investigations kidnaps John Watson, whether it's on accident thinking it's him, or on purpose and he has to go to Malta to find him. Flowers could still remain a clue, after all, they've remained significant in the first two movies. There could also be a connection to Enola, after all, she was the one who chose him to be a flatmate for Sherlock, and that's why she goes too. She either drags Tewkesbury along, or Tewkesbury has some convenient high society event happening in Malta at the same time, and has dragged her along, which is where she meets up with Sherlock, and it's either coincidental or fate that these two events coincide. Presumably it would be at the hands of Moriarty though. Moriarty would obviously escape again at the end of the film, but I would expect we'd learn a considerable bit more about her. I also wonder if she's going to be a foil to the feminist movement. You know how Enola suspected her mother of committing some serious crimes with the House of Lords back in the first movie? Well, maybe Moriarty's similarly motivated, but actually commits these type of attacks. It could add an extra layer to the storyline and act as a buffer to the suffragette movement. I'm not even sure if she'd want to do it out of a genuine want for better rights for women, but more for her own sadistic gain. There's a lot that could be played out here. The only problem I can have for this story is that it's difficult for me to see how you could get a proper introduction to Watson. I understand in the first two movies they did a pretty good job of setting up the characters Enola was hunting down and helping you feel connected to them. The reason why I think it's different here though, is the fact that Watson was introduced in the last movie, albeit very briefly. So if you then just take him away again, and it's a mystery about finding him, I feel like you get slightly robbed of being properly introduced to this character and seeing what he can do. Obviously there's ways to write around that and still do a good story, I just think it's trickier to pull off. Enola's mum and Edith will also likely come into the fray later in the movie. I couldn't imagine Edith not turning up. She's such a good character, and I'll be mad if she's not in it. That'll probably be more associated with the Moriarty plot in my eyes. I reckon she's actually known about Moriarty for some time, and I wonder if that's why she originally left. It would add more closure and a significant reason as to why she so abruptly left in the first movie, other than, I'm a feminist, bye. I also think this is the perfect time for Mycroft to come back into the story. He could be either in the theoretical high society function, or he could be helping Sherlock with Watson. Maybe they do have some connection, but I doubt it. I feel like that's been substituted with Enola instead. I know they want to build up her and Sherlock's relationship to be a close one, and they should, but I do think it's unrealistic and unreasonable for him to vanish off the face of the earth and never enter their lives again. This is coming from someone who absolutely hated his guts in the first movie. I can't get that scene out of my head where he just screams at Enola. That was brutal. Still, it could add to the dysfunctional family vibe. And like I said, I'd love a scene between him and Eudora. I don't think he could treat her the way he treated Enola. I actually suspect he'd be quite scared. The dynamic in my mind is that scene from The Crown where the tutor advises Elizabeth to tell off the politicians because being told off by nannies is what they most want in life. This time, I'll also suspect that Sherlock's going to actively enlist Enola's help. Enola's going to find out before Sherlock asks, of course, but I definitely think he'll need help this time, and they've been building to them working together for quite a while. I know they said in the previous film that she doesn't want to be in his shadow, and I agree, but I don't think that this is that type of case. This time it's personal with Watson, and I think because Moriarty's likely involved pulling the strings, he's going to need her. They'll probably divide and conquer, but it'll be a more solid working relationship. It might also rustle some uncomfortable feathers for Euphoria, I dare say. To be honest, I could even imagine Tewksbury helping out on this one. He's got higher connections and can find out information from different sources more easily. Finally, my big prediction is that this film is where Tewksbury is going to propose. That's why I think he was late. That's partially why I think he's taken her to Malta, but knowing him, he's too flustered and too nervous. I also think Enola's misread the whole situation as being cold and disinterested, and is therefore mad at him about that. Obviously, happy times in the end, which is where I think the proposal is going to occur, but I think that will play out. It might be a little cliche, but it's also completely them, and I'd love every minute. The relationship probably needs that progression, and it's the perfect next step in my eyes. Can you tell I'm excited? I seriously can't wait for this movie to release. It's going to be torture waiting, and I certainly hope this isn't the last. Keep making more. There's still more books. I want middle-aged Millie Bobby Brown churning these out. They're such wholesome, fun movies. It gives me my Sherlock fix without the BBC series or the Robert Downey Jr. movies. Honestly, at this point, I kind of prefer Enola Holmes over both of them. And that's saying something. With all that being said, though, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the upcoming Enola Holmes movie? Are you excited for it? Maybe not. Where do you think the story will go next? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.